Outside, wide, left, fake, 396, bag, knee hand, knee puck. Is that long enough for you? 396. Check New York Bozo! New York Bozo! New York Bozo!
Hey, welcome in. Happy Sunday as the Packers gear up for an NFC North division matchup between the 5-7 Detroit Lions, at the 5-7 Detroit Lions, that is, playing in Ford Field today. And as we'll talk about, I'm sure, in a few minutes, Packers in the last decade, half decade or so, haven't had the most success in Ford Field. So looking to buck that trend today as they travel to take on the 5-7 Lions. I'm Alex Strouf alongside my good friend Jacob Westendorf here to break down this matchup. As the Packers do have an opportunity to win the NFC North outright with a win today and a Vikings loss. We'll keep an eye on that matchup as it is coming to the end in the fourth quarter now between the Vikings and the Buccaneers, where the Buccaneers lead. So if that hangs true, the Packers with a win will be NFC North division champions. But Jacob, good to see you, my friend. How are you on this fine Sunday?
It's good to be back. I'm hoping it's clinching day. You know, the Vikings trail by 9 here with about 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So always want to get that done as early as possible. Get that clinching scenario in place. Get yourself your hats and your T-shirts and focus on. The Packers obviously have some bigger fish to fry in terms of, you know, first round buys, NFC championships, potentially some Super Bowl type stuff. So get this first step out of the way and get moving. But it's good to be here and got some business to take care of in Detroit as well.
100% business to take care of in Detroit. Now, where do we want to start? Let's start with the Packers, as they've been on a roll. They've won 4 of their last 5. They've scored 30-plus points each of the last 3 weeks. And it seems like they've been bringing the juice, especially on offense, the last couple weeks. Good to see. Let's hope they can keep it rolling, though, here in Detroit.
Yeah, and they're really one horrendous third quarter away from winning 5 of their last 5, like you mentioned. I mean, the third quarter in Indianapolis might be their worst quarter of the season, and uncharacteristically turning the ball over 4 times in that game. I mean, it was just a kind of a perfect storm of crap, if you will, in the third quarter of that game. Honestly, if the Packers offense plays the way that they normally do, Dan Bailey just missed a 46-yard field goal. That's his 4th missed kick today. He's having a Mason Crosby at Ford Field in 2018 kind of day today, that poor guy. Is there anybody that hates kickers more than Mike Zimmer? And maybe justifiably so.
Justifiably so, I think is the answer there, Jacob. I mean, there has been no success for Vikings kickers, it seems, the last 5 years.
Oh, my goodness. It's horrible. But anyways, to finish my point, you know, the Packers, if their offense does anything in the third quarter against Indianapolis, they win that game probably by 2 scores. But unfortunately, they didn't, and they went 3 and out twice, and they were in 6 plays in the third quarter, and they lose the game, a game that they probably should have won. And right now, if both the Packers and the Saints hold serve the rest of the way, that game may very well be the difference between hosting an NFC championship game versus having to go back to the Superdome facing off against the fighting Taysom Hills. So they've played well. They've brought the juice. I don't think energy is going to be an issue, although in this building the last time the Packers played well at Ford Field was 2016. And that was when they finished running the table, winning the NFC North, the Aaron Rodgers 9-second touchdown pass to Geronimo Allison, where he throws on a really big championship belt on the sideline there with everything. But otherwise they haven't played well since then. A couple of those one was a start by Brett Hundley. And then obviously last year might've been their worst win of the season. I mean, they were down, I think 17-3 at one point. It's been rough going into Ford Field. So I'm looking forward to what I hope is a start to finish wire to wire dominant win and a hat and a T-shirt.
Similar to what it was in week 3 is what you're hoping for, as the Packers won that matchup at Lambeau Field 42-21. They doubled their score and beat them by 3 touchdowns. So you usually like when that happens. Hopefully history repeats itself in Ford Field. I see some people chiming in on the live chat in regards to one of the notes I wanted to bring up in regards to the Packers. We saw Tyler Irvin go on IR this week. Therefore, Tavon Austin is active for the Packers today for the first time since joining the green and the gold, expected to return kicks and punts and see some time on offense. So I ask you, before I follow up with my answer, what are the expectations for Tavon Austin today?
Well, Dan Kotnick promised he was going to win the Super Bowl MVP. So, I mean, we had that joke as soon as he signed that future Super Bowl MVP Tavon Austin signed with the Packers. But he is the punt returner the Packers have had with the most juice since Randall Cobb.
Sure.
Even Micah Hyde wasn't a punt returner that had a lot of juice. I think he was just smart. Like, Micah Hyde's one of the smartest football players the Packers have had here in recent memory. He was just able to use angles and stuff like that. I think I'm excited to see him just because, again, Green Bay hasn't had a returner in that position that's been able to do things like this since prime Randall Cobb, which is 2011, 2012. I'm excited to see it as well. Hopefully he's not returning a lot of kickoffs today, because that means the Lions are scoring points, but a lot of punts. I could see something like that. And these are like some little on the margin type of moves that can make or break a kind of season. We've seen that happen before. I go back to 2012 when the Packers, it was a move at the time that we probably didn't think much of, but they replaced Randall Cobb on punts with Jeremy Ross. They play in San Francisco. Jeremy Ross fumbles a punt.
I forgot about him.
Jeremy Ross fumbles a punt, and it changes the entire game trajectory of that game. The Packers had a chance to go up 21-7 in that game if they get the ball. It was 14-7 them at the time. They have a chance to go up and control that game if they're able to go and score. Of course, Ross fumbles, and they weren't able to do that. It's 14-14 instead of 17-7, 21-7. On offense, I think what I like about it the most is it allows them to put somebody in that Tyler Irvin role instead of having to displace someone like Jamal Williams or Aaron Jones, who, nothing against those guys, but I prefer them in their traditional running back roles or playing in that receiver role, not having to do all that stuff on the fly. And you've heard it. I mean, you've been in. Jamal Williams has talked about how difficult it is to adjust to that role, where now not only do I have to run, it's 52 yards sideline to sideline, having to run 2/3 of that across the field, and then have to run my route, my play, catch the ball maybe, and run after that. It's a tiring thing, and it could tire those backs out pretty quickly. So I don't think he's going to be, this added weapon, but I look forward to maybe some different dimensions they can bring into the offense. And you've heard a lot of his teammates sound really excited about having him on the team. So I'm looking forward to something.
Yeah, that's an important note that I was going to bring up, and I'm glad you closed out with that. There's players on this team that are speaking very highly of a guy that's only been with the team half of a month. And Tavon Austin does bring that level of speed and that big playability and the ability, similar to Tyler Irvin, to stretch the offense and stretch the field, right? He brings that versatility where he'll play some different positions that maybe most guys already on that offense can't play. So I'm interested to see what role he'll play. I don't expect it'll be a big one. I don't expect he'll see the offensive field time that maybe Tyler Irvin has this season, but we'll see him on offense and we'll see what he's got, at least to some degree. And I'm excited to see what that versatility he brings does to that Packers offense. And maybe I'm completely wrong and he plays more than I expect, but I don't expect a huge role from him today, but definitely on punt returns. Excited to hear your thoughts in the live chat on Tavon Austin, and also some of you speaking about Anthony Rush, who's also active for the first time today for Green Bay, obviously with Billy Wynn going down.
Oh, Ryan Pickett, that would be something.
That would be something, wouldn't it? That's high praise. But Kim chimes in on the Facebook chat, 361 pounds, 6'4". In case you're unfamiliar, that is a human beast. That is a big man, and he's going to hopefully plug up the middle, as it's no secret the Packers' rush defense has not been supreme by any means this year.
No, and they've been beaten up on the defensive line. You talk about when you're not that strong up there to begin with, when you start losing some of the guys you have, Montravius Adams out for the season, Billy Wynn out for the next few weeks. There's some attrition that has taken place. Now, they played better last week for all the discussion and everything that took place about Miles Sanders taking over the game, or the doom and gloomers that were talking about Jordan Howard repeating last year's performance. The Packers really didn't give up anything on the ground last week. Dean Lowry played maybe his best game since he signed that extension in Green Bay. Kenny Clark is playing better up front. I look forward to seeing. I think that's going to be Detroit's plan today, is to try and shorten the game because they are outmatched. You look at the defense, and we'll get to that, I'm sure, but they're missing their top 2 corners. They can't stop the run, and they struggle to rush the passer. That's not a good recipe for success against Aaron Charles Rodgers and Aaron Jones and Devontae Adams, among others. So on that side of the ball, yeah, I think it's going to be Detroit trying to hammer Adrian Peterson and DeAndre Swift. And they do have some playmakers, Detroit does, on the offensive side of the ball that match up well with where Green Bay maybe doesn't. I mentioned those 2 running backs, and I mentioned now TJ Hawkinson, who he's a really good tight end.
Really good tight end.
Was a first-round pick, and he's starting to kind of come into his own a little bit. And then you talk about Marvin Jones, who is on the always good against the Packers all-star team. So I don't know if it's real or anything like that, but it feels like he always plays really well against Green Bay. So they have some opportunities. And Matthew Stafford, I don't have that high of an opinion of him, but he has the ability to make some plays on that side of the ball. So
no doubt about it. And we've seen it, the Monday night game in Green Bay last year, we saw, Marvin Jones and Matthew Stafford get hot a little bit. I know that was last season, but that does show the ability that Matthew Stafford has, especially once he's comfortable. What to know on the Detroit Lions, as it says on your screen, and as I've said a few times, they are 5-7 on the year. Not mathematically eliminated yet, but pretty darn close. Darrell Bevell has taken over, as their head coach after firing Matt Patricia 2 weeks ago. Bevell, the former Packers quarterbacks coach, is 1-0 as a head coach after knocking off the Chicago Bears last week, 34-30. Adrian Peterson, as mentioned, has been hot. He looks like 2010, 2009 Adrian Peterson. He's got 4 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks, but a little additive to that backfield now is DeAndre Swift is active for the first time since week 10 here in week 14. So the 2-headed monster in that backfield is going to be alive today, Jacob. Do you have expectations of cooling off or staying hot for Adrian Peterson? And the second half of that question, what kind of impact do you expect out of Swift after being gone for the last 3 weeks?
None. I mean, the Lions just don't worry me. And I know everybody's saying, oh, it's Ford Field, that matters or something. The Lions don't match up. And, their offensive front is something that has taken a bit of a hit. They're missing some starters up there. Everybody's talking about how they got that bump from their interim coach last week playing in Chicago. Realistically, Chicago should have won that game if Mitchell Trubisky could hold on to the football. They didn't. On the defensive side of the ball, they can't stop Green Bay. Unless Green Bay stops themselves, which I guess is certainly a possibility. We've seen them do that at times this season, but they're missing 2 corners. They're missing pass rushers. Everson Griffin was placed on the COVID list. They're not able to stop the run, and Green Bay has a couple really good running backs that had some really good days against them the last time these 2 teams met. You guys saw it. Green Bay spotted Detroit a 14. You mentioned that they beat them 42-21 the last time these 2 teams played. Green Bay spotted them a 14-3 lead.
Yeah.
And still, then they go on a 39-7 run to close that game out. And that was with Detroit having some of these guys that I just mentioned active. Adrian Peterson's 100 years old. I know that he's played well against the Packers in the past, and he'll probably break a big run or something like that. And you'd be like, oh, there you go. There's vintage Adrian Peterson. But you're going to look up at the end of the game and just figure out that, okay, he had 15 carries for 45 yards and just didn't impact the game all that much. And DeAndre Swift, he'll probably catch a couple of passes, maybe have a gash play in the running game or something like that. But I can't picture it. I can't picture Detroit being able to slow this game down enough to where Green Bay can't score enough points to where they have to abandon their running game altogether. And with an injured Matthew Stafford, who doesn't move all that well and is prone to making he makes little mistakes that pile up into big mistakes.
Yeah, I agree.
And he did something like that. I remember it was just before halftime. The last time these 2 teams met, Green Bay ended up getting a touchdown before the half. Robert Tunyon's first touchdown of the season was because Matthew Stafford took a coverage sack that he couldn't take on his own 1-yard line. He could have checked it down. He could have done anything else in that play, but instead he took the sack, giving Detroit no chance on a 3rd and long. Those are some of those small mistakes that he makes that don't necessarily show up in the box score. And it's another one of those things when I talk about with Matthew Stafford, if there's a quarterback and you talk about what's tangible, he has everything tangible. Strong arm, the ability to move a little bit, the brain, all that stuff. When it comes to intangibles, he has none. There is nothing about him that screams just the ability to do certain, like just the it factor, if you will, the stuff that people talk about with some of the greats like the Aaron Rodgerses and the Tom Brady's and the Peyton Mannings and stuff like that. Part of the reason the Lions are the Lions, and people that feel sorry for Matthew Stafford and say, oh man, he deserves to play for somebody other than the Lions. Well, part of the reason the Lions are the Lions is because Matthew Stafford is Matthew Stafford.
Yeah. No, that's completely fair, my friend. And Matthew Stafford is one of those interesting quarterbacks, right? With the huge or the high ceiling every year, but never quite lives up to the potential. I mean, preseason, I remember people, and maybe not the sharpest tools in the shed by any means, but people were throwing him into the way too early MVP conversation. If he can have that offense rolling consistently, like he's done in the past, maybe not very many times, but if he can get that offense rolling consistently, he can be a dangerously good quarterback. We haven't seen that this year by any means. And, some of the health that you've mentioned, the offensive line injuries, Kenny Galladay has been out for most of the season. I mean, that certainly hasn't helped. But TJ Hawkinson has been one of the top tight ends in football this year. He's really coming into his own in his second year, the Lions tight end. And Adrian Peterson, like I said, is playing like he did a decade ago. 4 touchdowns in the last 2 games for Detroit. So interesting to see what they can bring to the table from an offensive standpoint.
And let me throw one more bit in here. Matthew Stafford is one of the poster children of why I hate fantasy football. Because Matthew Stafford wouldn't be as highly thought of, and we wouldn't be having conversations like that if fantasy football didn't exist. Kirk Cousins is another player like that. Phillip Rivers, to a lesser degree, is kind of like that. But just poster children of why fantasy football sucks.
Yeah, and speaking of fantasy,
so
me too. But speaking of fantasy football, we were talking about this before the show. I just want to drop this in real quickly. Josh Jacobs, the running back of the Las Vegas Raiders, was reported as active this week.
A hero.
He then put on a hero. He then put on his Instagram story, sorry guys, not playing this week. Followed it up with a lot of hot, meaning angry fantasy owners right now. In the bottom of the screen in tiny text said, oh, well, middle finger emoji, yo fantasy. Then 20 minutes later, reported as warming up on the field with the Raiders ahead of their matchup with who did they play again this week? It's the Raiders and the I'm having a quick brain fart here. 1 second. And the Colts they play this week.
Yes, that's right.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Just a quick game break, I guess, if you will, in between our show. The Buccaneers' Ryan Suckup did hit a 40-yard plus field goal to make it a 12-point lead for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 14-26 with under 6 minutes to go between Minnesota and Tampa Bay. Just a reminder, the Vikings lose and the Packers win. It's hat and T-shirt time for the Packers. They will win the NFC North championship for a second straight year if the Vikings lose and they can knock off the Lions. This is the PreSnap presented by GameOnWisconsin.com. I'm Alex Strouf alongside Jacob Westendorf, bringing you right up to kickoff as the Packers prepare for an NFC North battle with the Detroit Lions. Feel free to chime in any questions, thoughts you have on the upcoming game. We'll be happy to feature those comments and help you direct, or rather, you help us direct this conversation. We want to talk about what you want to hear, so feel free to chime in on Periscope, YouTube, or Facebook.
I got something interesting, Alex, that just broke a little bit. Rob Demovsky is reporting that Aaron Jones is seeking new representation. Obviously, we're heading into the final month of the season with an expiring contract. So the two sides had been in ongoing negotiations, unable to reach a deal. And now he says this, it appears they're starting over. No paperwork has been filed with the NFLPA yet to name a new agent. So something that we've known, obviously, is that Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams had the same agent. And now, obviously, they no longer do. But just something interesting to keep an eye on, obviously, as the Packers go into the end of the month here. That's an expiring contract, and the Packers are looking to, they got their 2 big deals done, and now it's kind of been a question of, KK, Aaron Jones, Corey Linsley, whoever. There's been some reports, I think last week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago now, Mike Florio reported that the cap may not drop as far as maybe first thought because teams don't want to have to basically purge their entire roster. So they may take some of the hit from that standpoint, which obviously helps the Packers if that very much is the case, that they wouldn't have to dump some of their team to keep some of their guys or just to be under the salary cap for next season. But him having a new agent, essentially, you're starting from scratch for a contract negotiation for something that I wasn't I was optimistic at one point in the season. I thought it was going to get done. I thought there was too much smoke for there to not be fire. But then when they get the Clark and the Bakhtiari deals done, and that deal continues to progress. And I mean, with all due respect to Aaron Jones, I'm not trying to sound disrespectful to him. When I watched Dalvin Cook today, for example. Those are two different players. And that's not meant to be a slight to Aaron Jones by any stretch. He's a very good player. Dalvin Cook is a great player. And if he's asking for Dalvin Cook money, he's not a Dalvin Cook level player. And I'm not saying that to be, again, disrespectful or anything like
Jacob,
that. But
what does this tell you? This tells me that they were not even in the same ballpark. You know, if he's completely scrapping the former deal and going to get a new rep, right, a new agency firm or a new agent or whatever it might be to negotiate this contract or potential contract, this tells me that the Packers and Aaron Jones weren't in the same ballpark at all. And I don't see that changing even if you change representation.
Or I wonder does it mean maybe, and granted, I don't know, but
I don't either.
Does the agent have a different interest than maybe the player and the player? Because I think back to like 2007, and Scott Boras was Alex Rodriguez's agent. Sure. Boras was negotiating with several teams, and basically A-Rod threw him out of negotiations and negotiated his contract himself with George Steinbrenner and made sure that he stayed with the Yankees at the time. So I'm not saying Aaron Jones is going to do that, but it's really interesting when you get into some of this contract stuff. Like, I mean, Aaron Jones
is plausible though.
Every player ever says, I mean, what player comes into the season is like, no, I'm done. Like, I know Richard Sherman has said like it's unlikely he'll be back with the 49ers, but that's not him saying he doesn't want to be back. Those are two different things. But Aaron Jones has said almost exclusively he wants to be back. He wants to play in Green Bay as long as he can. And he appears to be, a valued member of this locker room and certainly a valued member of the team. He's one of the best he is the best running back on the team, one of the best players on the offense. I'm interested just to see what it all means. The Packers offseason this year, and I've talked to Ken Ingalls and some of the salary guys that are way smarter about this stuff than I am, and just how fascinating some of the decisions they can make could be. Because, for example, 3 weeks ago after the Indianapolis game, if we're talking about Preston Smith, just for example, that's an easy one, right? Cut him. But let's say he has another game today the way he's had the last 2 weeks and finishes the season playing like that. Is it easy now? I mean, cutting a pass rusher for $8 million, that's a relatively cheap contract for a player who is pretty damn good. If that's the way he's going to play, obviously. So this Packers offseason is going to be and Kevin King was somebody, he landed on that injury report after or before the Colts game. And I had written an article for Game On that said basically, where's the sweet spot that you can find? And is there a contract that works for both King and for the Packers? Because the Packers are not only relying on him as a starter, but then they're committing some sort of money. And is there a number that can make sense for both sides? I wasn't sure there was. Now, King's played incredible the last 3 weeks. Like, he's been one of their best players on the field. So is that changing some of the numbers? And is that changing some of the thought process? It's been a really fun way to just kind of look at how this team is going to be built for now and the future.
Kirk Cousins was just sacked and fumbled, lost the ball. Tampa Bay recovered with 2 minutes and 5 seconds remaining, and it is a 2-possession game.
It's looking pretty
good. It could be clinching day for the Green Bay Packers as they head to Detroit. But just real quick on this contract situation, we've been talking about the upcoming Packers offseason for I know I began talking about it in June because there wasn't a whole hell of a lot else to be talking about. But this is a really big year, a ton of free agents for the Packers on the other side of this season. Hopefully it culminates in a Super Bowl victory because then maybe you don't feel so bad letting some of those guys go because you got your Lombardi. But in the case it doesn't, you have a lot of tough decisions regardless to make. Kevin King is a name you mentioned. We've got, Corey Linsley still waiting on a deal. Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, Tyler Ervin, all free agents after this season. So a lot of tough decisions to be made. And with the Aaron Jones, this does tell me maybe he wants to stay in Green Bay, but I'd imagine they're not in the same ballpark number-wise. It'll be interesting to see as more details emerge in the next couple of days. But I'm still in the same boat I was before the season. Aaron Jones, terrific back, going to go get money somewhere, even if it's not Green Bay. If Aaron Jones is not a Packer next year, I really hope Jamal Williams still is, because I think the 1-2 punch of Williams and Dillon will still perfectly suffice for this Green Bay offense. Are you with me on that or no?
We've seen it, right? I mean, Dylan
Yeah.
and granted, the game against Minnesota, the Packers offense didn't play particularly well, but you can almost throw that as an asterisk because the wind was blowing the way that it was. Aaron Jones, for all intents and purposes this year, he's a very good player. Again, like I mentioned, is he having a great season? Not really. He has 200-yard rushing. He's had 2 100-yard rushing games, and one of them came last week. And both of them, granted, you can't take away these big runs, but both of them are buoyed by 70+ yard rushing touchdowns. I mean,
yeah,
he's a very good player, and I think that he should get his money from somewhere. I just don't know what that number comes to and what he thinks he's worth. I wonder, like if you mentioned, is there a disconnect? Does he think he needs Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara money? And I don't think he's necessarily that. Now, he played very well last week, and there's a lot of reasons why he may not have the yardage totals that you're looking for. I think there's no question he is the best running back on this team. If you're building this team, if you do what I do when you turn on Madden, and the first thing you do is go to settings and go to salary cap and turn it off, then there's no question. The best thing that you can do is pair him with A.J. Dillon because their running styles complement each other perfectly.
Yeah.
However, unfortunately, there is no option of turning the salary cap off. This is the NFL. It's not Madden. And I'm with you. I think that this Packers offense has hummed all season. And as long as this team has Aaron Rodgers on it, who the running back is going to be relatively secondary as to who is catching the football from these guys. So I think you're looking at, is Devontae Adams still here? Is Alan Lazard still here? Is Robert Tonyan still here? Did they trade for Odell Beckham? Okay, that last one was a joke, but you know what I mean? Do they have guys that can catch passes? Do they still have the guys that can block for 12? Do they have the ability to throw the ball? Because that's ultimately what's going to be more important. And yeah, they're going to have guys like Jamal Williams. I do think they'll pick one or the other between Jamal or Aaron Jones to pair with it. Because I think with A.J. Dillon missing a month on the COVID list, it's going to be hard to basically just hand him the starting running back job. Maybe they will, but I can't picture that.
I can't either. That'd be hard for me to believe unless he has like a Brandon Jackson playoff run where he comes out of nowhere and all of a sudden looks like maybe he's deserving of it. But I imagine he won't get those reps to even have that opportunity. So it'll be interesting to see. I think so too. They bring one of the two back. Yeah,
I tend to as well. And you've seen it. This team has struggled to just hand the reins to young guys, whether that's even Jay Sternberger is a second-year player. His snaps aren't where we thought they were going to be.
Not at all.
And that's a byproduct, I think, of just the way that this Packers coaching staff and this team in general, I think they value that veteran thought of, I know what they're going to do. I know where they're going to be. I know everything that's happening for this team right now. So I think all of that stuff happens, certainly.
100%. And Jay Sternberger, you bring him up. He is inactive today. So concussion. So he will not play, but Tonyan and Mercedes Lewis, obviously both active for the Packers. I want to talk about the big dog. I want to talk about the scoring output we've seen from Green Bay the last 3 weeks, 30 plus. We've talked a lot this season. I mean, it's been one of the top topics for us here on these shows this season. Is the Packers kind of making their season about scoring 30 points. Typically when they do that, they win, and they have done that. The last 3 weeks, they've scored 30 plus, and they've won 4 of their last 5. So Packers in good shape at 9-3. It's looking almost 100% that with a win, they will be NFC North champions. Just over 70 seconds left in the Buccaneers-Vikings game, and it is 36 seconds left
They're
on
kneeling
4th
out the
and
clock.
12.
Yeah, they're kneeling out the clock.
Do the Vikings have timeouts left?
No. Tommy's about to take a knee in there.
Okay,
so, Tom, I take
over.
back one, as promised. I take back 1/3 of the mean things I've said about you. So there's that. I'm sorry, Tom. You're still the fraudulent goat.
There you go. One of the 30. So I've been waiting a half an hour to pull up this graphic. Here it is. It's official. The Packers clinch the NFC North title with a win at Detroit. This kind of changes the dynamic of the show all of a sudden, Jacob.
Yeah.
I mean, it's official. A win, and you are in for Green Bay. How do you think they're feeling here? Only 30 minutes ahead of kickoff. They've got to be feeling pretty good at Ford Field.
Well, I will say this. I don't know if they know. You know what I mean? I remember after, what was it? The Panthers won the NFC Championship game a few years ago, and they told Cam, like, how do you feel about going against the Broncos? And he basically said, oh, we're going to play the sheriff. And somebody was like, how did you not know that? It's like, guys, these dudes are locked in when they walk into the tunnel and in the stadium. So the Packers may not know yet that is their opportunity. But if they do, I will say this. What was their best game last season? Oakland, maybe. But the other one is Minnesota at Minnesota when they had a chance to clinch the NFC North, right?
Correct. Yeah.
When 55 smells blood in the water, it's go time. So I don't think energy is going to be an issue. I don't think anything like that is going to be an issue. When they smell blood, they're ready to go. And I'm ready to start the playoff beard. I'm shaved and prepared for the occasion. I think that, I'm ready to roll for that. So I think the guys are going to pull through for that today. But I think they are, if they know they're prepared and they're ready, and I think they know that they would have this opportunity anyway. So I think they're juiced up, to use their phrasing. I think they're ready to go. If they get this one out of the way, then you don't have to worry about putting all that stuff together. Then you could start looking ahead at some of your bigger goals, like that number 1 seed, like that NFC championship game, some of those kinds of things as we get down the stretch here, where the Packers, I still think they have a really good chance to run the table and finish 13-3 with Carolina and Tennessee at home. And then a Chicago team that I know Chicago won today, or they were winning big earlier. So they probably won today.
Winning big, yeah.
That certainly is a team that is a candidate to have quit on their head coach by the end of the season and have just basically said, okay, forget it. I'm not worried about it. The Packers could potentially be playing for the 1 seed that day. I think if you get all that done and get it ready, just get that first part out of the way today, get yourself a hat and a t-shirt. I keep using that because I love that Zadarius Smith said that last year. But, the Lions, I think there's some, poetry to it or some symmetry to it. And I love that they have a chance for a second year in a row to clinch the North against a divisional opponent on the road under Matt LaFleur. And we talked about this yesterday on Pulse, where, they were one bad hire away from going the complete opposite direction of where they've been. And it's kind of remarkable how quickly they've turned this around to where, at worst this season, I think the Packers finished 12-4. So that means at worst, the Packers will be 25-7 in 2 seasons under Matt LaFleur. That's incredible to me. And it's a special time. It's a great time to be a Packers fan. There will be a day in the future, hopefully not the too near future, where this team stacks seasons together like the 2018 one and worse. And that's not right now. So for the people that call this team mediocre, I advise you to go watch some other actual teams that are actually mediocre, because this Packers team certainly is not.
Certainly is not. They've played really solid this year, and it seems like they're really coming into their own as running the table is completely on the table, if you will. I think that's definitely something that I think Packers fans can get comfortable with. And although there might be one skid in the remaining games, I feel pretty good about where they're at, and they're peaking at the right time. And that's what you hear 99% of the head coaches in the National Football League talk about. You got to get hot at the right time. And December, certainly a right time, especially when you're only 1 game back of the top seed in the NFC. Let's go around the NFL quickly. 2 games are final. We mentioned the Vikings losing to the Bucs 26-14. The other game that's final was Andy Dalton got his revenge at Cincinnati, 30-7, the final there. The Bears just punted the ball back over to Houston, but they hold a 36-7 lead over the Bill O'Brien-less Texans. I didn't expect it to be this big of a blowout, man. The Bears look good. Mitch Trubisky's looked really good today, which I don't think I've uttered that sentence once this year. 24 of 33, 267 yards, 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, and clearly the right decision to take him over Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes, who threw 3 interceptions today. Watson, obviously, his counterpart. He'll be 1-0 against him. Matt Nagy and Mitchell Trubisky forever. Give those guys extensions.
100%. Yeah, Mahomes today definitely helping Aaron Rodgers' MVP case. He took a 40-yard sack early in the game. He's 21 of 31, 351 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions for Mahomes, the likely MVP frontrunner. Maybe we can change that narrative here in a few hours. But the Chiefs lead the Dolphins 30-24, 6-point game in Miami. But the Chiefs have the ball with about 3.5 minutes left. Tennessee up on top of the Jags at the 2-minute warning, 31-10. The Cardinals on top of the New York Football Giants, who look like football children down 26-7 against the Kyler Murray-led Cardinals. Denver and Carolina in a Super Bowl 50 rematch. It's a close game, too, only a 5-point game. Denver leads 32-27, under 3 minutes, but Carolina does have the ball. Your afternoon slate looks like this. Indianapolis at Las Vegas, kicking off in about 5 minutes. The Jets are at Seattle looking for their first win this season. Probably not going to happen. That kicks off also in about 3 or 4 minutes. And then the 3:25 games, big slate today. Atlanta at the Chargers. New Orleans, who holds the 1 seed in the NFC, a game ahead of the Packers, at Philadelphia today, 3-8-1, the Eagles. Jalen Hurts getting his first start. Yeah, we're all big Eagles fans this week after not being Eagles fans last week. 2 5-7 teams hoping for a playoff spot in the NFC going at it as the football team travels to take on the reigning NFC champion 49ers. And tonight, the nightcap's a fun one. Pittsburgh at Buffalo, 2 of the best teams in the AFC, going head-to-head on Sunday Night Football. So that is your Sunday slate. Brought to you by Game On Wisconsin. So outside of this Packers game, which game are you most excited to watch that hasn't been played yet?
Pittsburgh and Buffalo. Those are 2 teams that, I mean, Pittsburgh, I think they've heard all the stuff all week about how they're, a fraudulent 11-1 coming off. They've had probably the weirdest season of anyone, having to have games moved and everything and none of it because of them, obviously. They've had teams they've played against with some COVID outbreaks, so they've had to move everything around for their sake. So that I think will be interesting. Buffalo still has an outside shot at the number 1 seed if they're able to win that game, and definitely a good shot at the number 2 seed if they're able to win that game. And also what that game could mean for the Cleveland Browns. If the Bills win tonight, then the Browns control their own destiny for winning that division because they play Pittsburgh in week 17. And that game could be for the 2 seed and the AFC North crown, which I think would be absolutely fascinating. I think the Bills are a very good team. They're the team that could kind of upset the apple cart, so to speak, if you will, if everybody was kind of including the Chiefs and the Steelers as your AFC championship game. The Bills are certainly a team that could stop that. I think one of the teams in the AFC South. The AFC South is both of those teams, the Titans and the Colts. Both of those teams, it wouldn't surprise me if they're playing championship Sunday. It also wouldn't surprise me if they're one and done. Like, I don't think either one of those teams know if they're any good. So nothing surprises me.
Yeah.
So I'm watching Steelers and Bills. Sometimes Sunday Night Football is one that you can kind of like use as background noise. This isn't one of them. This is kind of a old school AFC, not a rivalry, but an AFC matchup that we watched a bunch in the 90s because these teams were both very good. And I'm just kind of bummed. This is one of those games that you wish there were fans in the stands for, because the Bills Mafia going up against the Steelers and everything like that, it would be just a really cool matchup. So I'm excited to see that one after the Packers clinch the NFC North here this afternoon.
Let's hope so. Let's go to bold predictions as the Packers travel to Ford Field. Again, a place they haven't had a ton of success the last few years. They won on a walk-off field goal a year ago from the leg of Mason Crosby. I'm kind of scared for what you're going to say, if I'm being honest. I'm not sure what's about to come out of your mouth. What do you got for bold predictions?
I was going to go with the low-hanging fruit of Tavon Austin, but I'm not confident enough in the Packers special teams to make a prediction about Tavon Austin. So I'm going to say Devontae Adams has 13 touchdowns this season. He can tie the record with Calvin Johnson, and I believe it's Randy Moss with 16 with 3 touchdowns today. Ooh. And I'm going to say he gets 3 touchdowns today. They don't have any corners. Rodgers loves throwing the ball to 17. I certainly think that that's something that they'll be able to do. So I think Devontae Adams has 3 touchdowns today and is able to tie that 16 touchdown mark.
Interesting. Yeah, Devontae Adams also looking to break a tie with Don Hudson for most consecutive games with a touchdown reception in Packers history. He would have 8.
He'll do that on the first possession.
Oh, okay. So a double Devontae Adams bold prediction out of Jacob Westendorf today. I like that. I will go the running route. I think with this news emerging surrounding Aaron Jones, he has a 2-touchdown game on the ground today. So I will go, not necessarily bold, I guess, 2 touchdowns for Aaron Jones on the ground today. But I will go with a special teams bold prediction, and that is J.K. Scott has a tackle today. J.K. Scott has a tackle today for Packers special teams. We haven't been super confident in the Packers special teams, and rightfully so. Sean Menenga, who's now on your screen, definitely has not had been our favorite coach. He's just such a bland looking human being. But that's
was it
beside
last
the
week?
point.
Kyle said he looks like a thumb.
Yeah, that's exactly why that picture is in our backstage area here. Yeah, that's why that was brought up. Yeah, I think so too. All right, let's go to game picks. Packers, Lions. I need a score and a winner, Jacob.
Detroit doesn't match up, and I've said this all week. I made the joke earlier in the week, Packers by 50 after I found out Galladay wasn't playing. I found out Tyrell Cosby wasn't playing. I found out their starting corners weren't playing. Just all that stuff piling up for an already inferior team, even if those guys do play. I think Green Bay wins, and I think they win big, 48-20 over the Lions. Wow. I don't see how Detroit can stop them. I mentioned it. They don't rush the passer. They can't cover receivers, and they have one of the worst run defenses in football. What do they stop against the number one offense in the NFL in scoring? I can't see it. So I think the points that they score either come early or in garbage time, but one or the other. And that seems to be the way that it worked last time. Ramage, what's up, man? Popping in. Appreciate you.
Matt saying Packers win big. He's with you.
I got a feeling he says that every week, but
I think so too.
I think so. But yeah, I think Green Bay wins, and I think they win big. So I'm excited for going into next week, and I'll be in town, and I'll be buying one of those division championship hats because they'll be readily available because they'll have done it. Yeah,
I think so too. I also think the Packers win, and I do as well. You know what? I've been back and forth on whether or not they win big. It seems like one of those games where we're going to be frustrated match times in, since I do say that every week.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, I will go Packers 38, Lions 27. I think they get on the board a little bit more than maybe we think. I'll say 38-27 for a Packers victory in an NFC North title, and I'll be buying a hat this week too because we're pretty pumped that the Packers will have a shot at the NFC North title after the Vikings lose to Tampa Bay in the noon slate. So 9-3 Packers head to Ford Field and Detroit to take on the 5-7 Lions. That is at 3:25 kickoff, less than 20 minutes away. Let's get you ready for what else we got on tap for you here at Game On Wisconsin. Right after the game, I'll be with you again for the post-route taking your calls and reaction to hopefully another second straight NFC North title for the Packers, as today's the day they can get, like we keep saying, a new hat and a new t-shirt. And then later tonight during the Sunday night football game, Buffalo and Pittsburgh, I'm going to join my buddy Matt Ramage over on his channel. We'll be taking your calls over there as well as we react to what we saw today from the Packers game and talk the rest of the NFL slate. We'll have an adult beverage, grab a cocktail, hang out with us. That'll be live over on Matt Ramage's socials. You can just find him by looking up his name, which is on your screen right now. So, Jacob, any closing thoughts, buddy?
No, just win. Honestly, I know I've said that I think Green Bay wins and that they win big, but I don't care if they win 23-20 like they did last year. Just this is the point in the season where all you care about is wins. Get it done. Make sure you keep pace with the Rams who won the other night. Obviously, you want to keep pace with the Saints who are playing a pretty winnable game, I think, against a defeated Eagles team who are playing, in my opinion, a bad quarterback. Now, granted, they were playing either a bad quarterback or a broken one. So, take your pick there as far as picking your poison. But just win. Show up. Play your game like you're supposed to. And if you do that, you should win, and you should win relatively handily.
Al Davis said it best. Just win, baby. Win. That's all you got to do today as the Packers look to clinch their second straight NFC North title. It's Jacob Westendorf. I'm Alex Strouf. Thanks for kicking it with us. Go Pack, go. And we'll see you after the game for the post route. Peace.